The story opens with a restaurant called Monk's. We are then shown a man grooming his mustache while looking into a mirror. It turns out he is trying to model his mustache after a man in a photo. Once he feels satisfied with the resemblance, the man gets up to leave the restaurant. However, something unusual happens before he exits. He places something down, which turns out to be a pistol. The scene ends with the man kissing another man who appears to be asleep. After that, the mustached man drinks a glass of wine and seems to be plotting something. The story is set during the influenza pandemic that terrorized America in 1918. The whole city is preoccupied with combating the outbreak, and this mysterious man takes advantage of the situation. He removes the body of the man he kissed and brings it to a police car, which is already busy evacuating influenza victims. After disposing of the body, the man escapes by boat, heading to an island inhabited by a renowned American writer named Jay, who is one of the most influential figures in the country. The man, who introduces himself as Floyd Monk, is accepted to work on the island as a chef. Jay's island is known for its strict privacy, especially during the influenza pandemic, and only a few people are allowed to enter. Strict isolation measures are in place. Jay, known for his sharp political commentaries, is always accompanied by luxury, even down to his comfortable footwear, which helps him think clearly and produce powerful writing that resonates with government officials. Jay is married to Julie, who enjoys gardening and regularly grows vegetables. However, she despises insects in her garden, and whenever she finds one, Jay has to step in to remove it. Although Jay easily calms his wife, something feels different this morning. They don't personally welcome the new chef, Floyd Monk. Instead, Jay's trusted assistant Catherine greets Monk. Catherine is very strict when it comes to following rules. Floyd Monk, known for his delicious and varied cuisine, is shown around the estate on his first day. He is eager to start his new job and takes in the various rooms and activities of Jay's household. While observing, he catches his first glimpse of Julie, who has just finished gardening. Monk initially expects to be given a room inside the grand mansion, but to his surprise he is assigned a small cabin situated near the edge of the forest. It turns out this is a standard rule that all staff must follow. From that night onward, dinner was served directly by Monk, marking his debut as the head chef at Jay's residence. Monk introduced himself as a chef willing to cook anything, even joking that he could cook without using fire, trying to lighten the mood. However, his words didn't break the ice as Jay's family was only focused on eating. Despite the awkward atmosphere, the meal Monk prepared was beautifully presented, with the first course seemingly winning over the family's approval. Later, the staff gathered in the cabin for dinner. Initially, everything was calm, but the peace was disrupted when Monk asked if he could drink wine. This question angered Catherine, while the two other staff members remained silent, as they had always followed the rules without question. Once everyone had eaten their fill, Jay turned to his nightly routine, which involved typing on his typewriter. He couldn't sleep well without it. However, unbeknownst to Jay, Monk was outside watching him deep in thought. The next morning, Monk was tasked with watching over Jay's children, but rather than just supervising them, he engaged them in a game of cards. Catherine soon arrived, furious over the poor quality of vegetables Monk had picked, including some poisonous mushrooms. As she scolded Monk, Jay's children and a female staff member remained silent, unsure of what was happening. Catherine demanded that Monk immediately start cooking. That evening, the staff gathered in the cabin again. With Catherine busy watching the children, Monk offered wine to the two other staff members, persuading them until they finally drank it. From their willingness to drink, Monk realized that they too wanted to rebel against the strict rules. Seizing this opportunity, Monk secretly picked some of the poisonous mushrooms, not for Jay's family, but specifically for Catherine. As the sole trusted chef, it was easy for Monk to execute his plan. After preparing breakfast with a smile, it was time to serve the meal. During breakfast, Catherine appeared pale, but no one suspected she was unwell. Julie and Jay remained unaware while Monk watched and waited. Catherine started sweating profusely and feeling overwhelming nausea, which became a serious issue when she suddenly vomited on Jay. Immediately, Catherine was rushed to the hospital as everyone assumed she had contracted influenza. The entire house was promptly cleaned, under the belief that she had been infected, though in reality, it was the poisonous mushrooms that had weakened her. Catherine, too drained to explain what had truly happened, couldn't defend herself. Not long after, the 3 staff members decided to meet with Jay. With Catherine gone, they took the initiative to voice their grievances. Monk provoked the male staff member to start the conversation, and they demanded a double raise in their salaries. Surprisingly, Jay immediately agreed, but this is where the real issue arose. Monk was still not satisfied. He said he had one more request, which puzzled the other 2 staff members. Unexpectedly, Monk's request was to be moved into the main building and no longer sleep in the cabin. That same night, all 3 staff members moved into the house. Monk's presence seemed to be a liberating force. Without Catherine, the staff no longer felt restricted, and they were now able to enjoy the same facilities as the family. The next morning, Jay, who was about to go for a swim, was shocked when Monk suddenly jumped into the pool ahead of him. Jay was furious and confused. A staff member named Khan warned Monk, but instead of listening, Monk challenged Khan to count while he held his breath underwater. At the same time, Jay received a phone call, preventing him from swimming, and Monk ended up enjoying the pool all by himself. Later that night, the staff gathered again, this time playing cards and enjoying their newfound freedom. Suddenly, Julie appeared, threatening to report their activities to Jay, but then added that she wouldn't if she was allowed to join them. Meanwhile, Jay received a call from the hospital regarding Catherine's condition, while his wife, Julie, played cards with the staff. The staff felt increasingly comfortable, and Monk, who had been planning something since his arrival, enjoyed his quiet victory. Julie ended up joining the staff for several hours, leaving her husband alone, completely unaware that she was drinking wine and playing cards with them. This was something the other 2 staff members never expected, but soon after, Jay entered the room. Speechless, he merely wanted to inform them about Catherine's situation, that she wasn't infected with influenza, but rather had suffered from food poisoning. The next morning, Jay woke up and went outside to sunbathe. Julie, the children, and the female staff member Tidwell were already sunbathing. Meanwhile, Monk and Khan were on their way to pick up Catherine. When they returned, they brought news that no one would like. The isolation had been tightened to the highest level, and the harbor was completely closed. This heightened isolation would affect the family's access to food supplies with no end in sight. That night, Jay discovered 2 strangers stealing food from the garden, but the thieves attacked him, leaving him unconscious. The next morning, a sheriff arrived to discuss the theft and delivered more bad news. The isolation would last for over a month. The sheriff also informed them about a murderer who had escaped to an island, showing them a photo of the suspect. As time passed, the family experienced a severe food crisis. The only remaining food was a supply of rice that had been untouched for nearly a year. It was hard to accept, especially with the children's strong appetites, which led to squabbles over the limited food. As Jay became increasingly stressed, Monk suddenly appeared with a weapon, announcing that he planned to hunt in the forest. Julie enthusiastically supported the idea. When the hunting trip began, however, it was Jay who took control. His ego kicked in, not wanting to appear useless. In the end, though, Jay didn't manage to shoot anything, while Monk's skill brought in the game. Jay had contributed nothing, and he was visibly shaken by the experience of killing. When it came time to eat the game, Monk surprised everyone by claiming that it was Jay who had contributed, not himself. Jay was shocked by this, as Monk openly praised him in front of the family. Both of Jay's children and even Julie showered him with praise, calling him a hero. This praise continued into dinner, where the family was ecstatic to have meat after going without for so long. However, Jay, a vegetarian who only ate white rice, felt bewildered by Monk's actions. He couldn't understand why Monk had lied, and the consequences of this became clear the next day. When Jay invited Monk to go hunting again, Julie and the children wanted to join them. Jay was immediately startled. How could his family want to come along when he had only ever hunted alone? He didn't want them to discover that his previous hunting experience was a lie. Fortunately, Jay was able to avoid the situation, by taking a phone call that conveniently came in. Meanwhile, Monk suggested that he would go fishing instead. Surprisingly, the entire family wanted to go fishing with Monk, leaving Jay alone just as he was about to share some important news. While fishing, Monk was busy relaxing, giving instructions without exerting any effort, leaving Khan and Tidwell to do the actual fishing and waiting. At this point, Monk had assumed the role of head of the family, lying beside the children and Julie, who was by his side. Meanwhile, Jay was still trying to learn how to hunt, unaware of what was happening by the riverbank, and his hunting efforts were a complete failure. At the same time, Monk continued to be praised by Julie. At home, Jay appeared increasingly isolated, left to busy himself with no one seeming to care. The situation grew worse and more obvious as time passed. The staff played games and cards with the children, while Monk spent more time alone with Julie. Suddenly, Jay stumbled in, heavily drunk, with music blaring from his room, providing the soundtrack to his lowest point. At one point, Julie was startled by Monk, who hurt himself by stepping on glass. Julie immediately gave him her full attention, and it became clear that Monk had staged this incident to gain her sympathy, pretending he couldn't walk properly. For hours, Julie cared for Monk, during which time Jay secretly watched. He saw his wife attending to Monk, and even witnessed Monk offering Julie a bottle of wine afterward. Overcome with pain, Jay looked away and hurriedly snuck into Monk's room. There, Jay discovered a photo labeled with the name Floyd Monk. Hearing Monk beginning to walk again, Jay panicked and had to leave quickly. Monk was still pretending to be in pain, which slowed him down and gave Jay time to hide in a room next to Monk's. However, Jay had mistakenly hidden in his daughter's room, who was still awake and confused by her father's behavior. Not long after, Jay confronted Julie, claiming that the chef in their house was not really Floyd Monk, but someone else entirely. Jay went further, insisting that Monk was a secret agent sent by the government to ruin his life. But Julie dismissed his concerns, thinking Jay was being ridiculous, and walked away, leaving him alone once again. The next day, Monk was hunting in the forest when Jay approached him. Jay didn't come to fight, but to ask Monk to leave his family and disappear for good. To back this request, Jay handed Monk an envelope filled with a substantial amount of money. Later that night, as Julie gathered with the staff downstairs to play cards, Jay suddenly appeared. He announced that he felt much happier because Monk had left. However, Monk hadn't actually gone anywhere. He appeared unexpectedly, revealing that Jay had bribed him with only $20 to leave. Julie was shocked, and Khan and Tidwell were equally surprised, recalling that they too had only been given $20 to leave in the past. Jay felt humiliated and realized that Monk was playing games with him again. No one stood up for Jay, and he was completely trampled upon. Even Khan, one of the staff, pushed Jay out of his own house. Jay was not allowed to sleep inside and was cast out, stripped of his dignity. As a result, Jay was forced to sleep and eat leftover food in the cabin. His mental state deteriorated under the stress, causing his health to decline further. He had no more ideas on how to retaliate against his wife and the staff. By morning, Jay was weak, sick, and utterly powerless. In the morning, Julie came to check on Jay, believing he had contracted influenza. Monk's game meat was prepared for Jay to eat. Monk, pretending to show sympathy in front of Julie, revealed his true attitude after she left. He threatened Jay, leaving him even more weakened. Monk symbolically asserted his dominance by wearing Jay's favorite shoes. Jay mentioned that the real Floyd Monk had died, but the impostor claimed that Jay was the one responsible for his death, indirectly blaming him for the closure of Floyd's restaurant, which ruined his life.
So he come over here from Dublin on a ship with nothing but the boots on his feet. 10 years worked a bar in a mess hall. And them closures come along. Your closures. It took it all away. It broke his spirit. But I didn't kill him, you did.
You were his partner.
Oh, bless him he is.
Monk deliberately dropped the food he had brought, leaving Jay without anything to eat for a long time. From the window, Jay had to watch as his wife and children laughed and spent joyful moments with the staff, with Monk now taking the role of the head of the family. After their time together, Jay was left in the dark about the growing attraction between Julie and Monk. Julie eventually invited Monk to the master bedroom, while Jay, weak and desperate, crawled on the floor, trying to reach the food he so desperately needed to ease his painful hunger. While Julie was enjoying herself, Jay was miserably eating his food, looking pitiful. Suddenly, the sheriff arrived with news that the port had reopened and the isolation had ended. Upon hearing this, Monk planned to escape, wanting to leave discreetly but without appearing rushed. Julie, meanwhile, suggested the sheriff take Jay to the cabin and bring him to the hospital, as she and the staff still believed Jay had influenza. Monk quickly claimed he would go to the hospital to pick up Catherine, though he actually intended to flee. Julie believed him without question. That night, Monk was left alone with the opportunity to leave, but his escape was short-lived. Out of nowhere, Jay appeared behind him, determined to kill the fake Floyd Monk. Without hesitation, Jay fired a bullet, its loud sound echoing through the air. The impostor Monk collapsed and died instantly, falling down the stairs. With Monk gone, Jay reclaimed his beloved shoes, symbolizing that no one would trample on him again, and he regained his place as the head of the family. Outside, Julie and the sheriff were calling for Jay. He emerged, explaining who the mustached man truly was. Soon after, the 2 remaining staff members were fired without ever seeing Jay's face. New staff were seen working in the garden as the former staff were dismissed. Jay was eventually promoted to the role of the local governor, gaining recognition for capturing one of the most wanted fugitives, making Jay's success even more appreciated. With the ordeal behind him, Jay could now live peacefully with his family, and his 2 children showed him great respect. Catherine also returned, resuming her important position as Jay's trusted staff member, remaining loyal and obedient as she had always been. However, one of the new staff members found a letter stained with Monk's blood, and Julie soon discovered the truth, that Monk was not the villain Jay made him out to be. Despite Julie's realization, Jay didn't respond to her accusations, content that his family had returned to normal. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.